I've always been a man of routines. Every morning for 35 years, I walk to our garage at exactly 6:15 a.m., punch in the code I've used since installing the keypad in '98, and check my Chevy. Some call it obsessive. I call it order. My tools hang on pegboards by size. My fishing gear sits in labeled containers. My workbench has a place for everything. Screws in magnetic trays, electrical tape on a dowel, super glue in the drawer that sticks. Lisa never understood my system. The garage is Frank's domain, she'd tell visitors. I'd get lost in there. So when the keypad beeped angrily at me 3 times last Tuesday morning, the sound jarred me. I tried again. Beep, beep, beep. Access denied. "Lisa," I called from the kitchen, keeping my voice casual. "Did you change the garage code?" She didn't look up from her coffee. "Oh yeah, meant to tell you. Changed it yesterday." She sipped. "They had that neighborhood meeting about break-ins over on Maple." "And you didn't think to mention it?" I asked, noticing how she avoided my eyes. "Figured you'd ask when you noticed." She shrugged. "It's 8453 now." I watched her. In 37 years of marriage, Lisa had never once cared about garage security. She barely remembered to lock the front door. Now she's reprogramming keypads? "Makes sense," I lied, heading back outside. The new code worked. The garage looked exactly as I'd left it, tidy, organized. But something felt off, like when you come home and your chair has been moved an inch. You can't quite identify it, but you know something's changed. That night, I couldn't sleep. While Lisa snored beside me, I stared at the ceiling, that garage keypad blinking in my mind like a warning light. I slipped out of bed around midnight and went to the window overlooking our garage. Movement caught my eye. The motion sensor light clicked on. Probably just a raccoon, I thought. But at 2:18 a.m. it happened again. This time, I saw a figure slip around the corner. My heart raced. Break in. Should I call the cops? I checked the security app. No alerts. The garage door remained secure. The next morning, I entered the new code. Everything looked normal at first, but my vintage fishing tackle box wasn't in its spot, and my workbench had been wiped down, tools rearranged slightly. Someone had been in my space, using my things. In my marriage, Lisa had always respected that this was my domain. Now she had changed the code without telling me, and let someone else in. I closed the door, heart heavy with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. I spent the next few days watching and waiting. Maybe I was being paranoid. 37 years with the same woman creates patterns, and Lisa's pattern had never included deception. But then again, it had never included changing security codes either. I started paying attention to her schedule. Lisa volunteered at the community center on Mondays and Thursdays, book club on Wednesday afternoons, regular as clockwork for years. But now she was adding errands, vague appointments that lacked details. "Going to help Carol organize that charity thing," she'd say, grabbing her purse. Or meeting Susan for coffee to discuss the fundraiser. Names I knew, but situations I couldn't verify. Her phone buzzed more often. She'd check it, walk into another room to respond. When I'd enter, she'd quickly pocket it or place it face down. Classic guilty behavior, just like customers who'd lie about maintaining their vehicles, then act surprised when they broke down. I hate being lied to, always have. In my shop, I fired a guy for lying about finishing a brake job. Could have killed someone. Dishonesty has consequences. Friday afternoon, Lisa announced she was meeting her sister for an early dinner. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing my cheek. "We might catch a movie after." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "Tell Janet I said hello." After she left, I called Janet. "Frank, what a surprise," my sister-in-law answered. "Everything okay?" "Just checking if you're still coming for the barbecue next weekend," I improvised. "Wouldn't miss it. Lisa mentioned you're trying that new marinade recipe." Her voice betrayed nothing unusual because she didn't know she was supposed to be having dinner with my wife right now. "Looking forward to it," I said, and hung up. I sat at our kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing. 40 years in the making, and our life was unraveling like a cheap sweater. One little tug, a garage code, and suddenly I was looking at threads I didn't recognize. I needed proof. Not suspicions, not coincidences, hard evidence. That night, I installed a small camera in a storage box on my workbench. Nothing fancy, just a motion-activated trail cam I used for scouting deer during hunting season. It uploaded images to my phone, perfectly legal to monitor my own property. I placed it strategically, angled to capture most of the garage. Then I waited. Saturday passed normally. Sunday, too. Lisa went to church. I skipped as usual. We had pot roast for dinner, watched 60 Minutes, went to bed. Monday morning, I checked the app. No activity. Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was at the hardware store. New motion alert. My hands trembled as I opened the app. There she was, my wife of almost 4 decades, entering my garage at 2:17 p.m. She moved with purpose, going straight to my workbench, shifting things around. Then she opened the side door. A man entered. The blood in my veins turned to ice. He wasn't particularly remarkable, maybe mid-30s, athletic build, wearing a polo shirt and slacks. Definitely not a handyman or delivery person. He moved like he belonged there, comfortable in my space. They didn't embrace or kiss, not in the frame anyway. They stood close, talking, his hand occasionally touching her arm. Then they moved toward my classic car, restored with thousands of hours of my labor. They were admiring it. His hands ran along the polished hood, touching what was mine. I zoomed in on his face, studying the stranger invading my life. He looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. What cut deepest wasn't the betrayal itself, though that was a knife to the gut, but the casualness of it. They weren't sneaking or rushing. They acted entitled to my space, like they'd done this many times before. After 15 minutes, they left together. The side door closed. My garage returned to silence, but nothing would ever be the same. I didn't confront Lisa that evening, or the next day. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Instead, I left the camera running and accessed our cell phone account online. Lisa wasn't tech-savvy. She still used the same password for everything, including our shared cell account. The call logs showed a recurring number, called nearly daily for the past 3 months. I didn't call it. Instead, I used a reverse lookup service, James Hoffman. The name didn't ring any bells, but I took a screenshot anyway. Wednesday brought another garage visit. This time, Lisa brought him a drink in my favorite Detroit Tigers mug. They stayed longer, 40 minutes, sitting in the camping chairs I kept folded in the corner. By Friday, I'd pieced together their routine. She only brought him on days she thought I'd be out for at least 2 hours. Mondays after her community center volunteering, Tuesdays when I had my standing hardware store run and coffee with former employees, Fridays when I usually went fishing. I canceled my fishing trip that week, telling my buddies I had a stomach bug. Instead, I parked down the street and watched my own house like a stranger. At 1:30, right on schedule, a blue Mazda pulled up. James Hoffman got out carrying a small paper bag, lunch probably, and walked up to my side garage door with the confidence of a man who'd done it dozens of times. I gripped my steering wheel until my knuckles went white. 3 months of this, at least. 3 months of this man, sitting in my chairs, drinking from my mugs, possibly even using my tools, while my wife served him drinks and laughed at his jokes. I'd spent my life fixing broken things, but this? I didn't even know where to start. The weekend passed in a fog of numb disbelief. I went through the motions, breakfast at the diner on Saturday, church with Lisa on Sunday, the first time in months, yard work in the afternoon. I smiled at the right times, nodded when appropriate, and felt nothing inside. Lisa asked if I was feeling all right. "Just tired," I said. Monday morning, after she left for her volunteer work, I searched our home. Not frantically, methodically, like diagnosing an engine issue. I checked her dresser drawers, the pockets of her coats, beneath the sink in her bathroom. Nothing unusual. Her home office yielded more. A small notepad with JH, followed by the garage code. A receipt for dinner at Milano's, a restaurant nicer than anywhere she'd gone with me in years. Dated 3 weeks ago. A jewelry box containing a silver bracelet I'd never seen her wear. I photographed everything, then returned it exactly as I'd found it. That afternoon I drove to the community center. The coordinator, Sandy, had known me for years. "Frank, good to see you," she greeted me. "Lisa's not here today." "No," I kept my voice casual. "Thought she had her usual Monday shift." Sandy frowned slightly. "Lisa stopped volunteering with us about 2 months ago, said she needed to cut back on commitments." I nodded as if this wasn't a blade twisting in my chest. My mistake. Memory's not what it used to be. Next stop, James Hoffman. The internet made this almost too easy. His LinkedIn profile listed him as a financial advisor at Meridian Wealth Management, downtown office. 15 years younger than me. Divorced, according to Facebook. A profile picture of him rock climbing. I sat in my truck across from his office building until 5:30, watching professionals stream out. Finally, I spotted him, navy suit, confident stride, checking his phone as he walked to the parking garage. I followed at a distance. He drove to an upscale apartment complex 15 minutes from my house. I noted the address, then drove home to prepare dinner for my wife. The same wife who hadn't volunteered in 2 months but left the house every Monday afternoon anyway. Tuesday morning, I called in a favor from Eddie, a former employee who became a private investigator after a back injury forced him out of mechanic work. "I need information on someone," I told him, sitting in his cluttered office. Discreetly. Eddie didn't ask why. He'd known me 20 years, long enough to trust I had my reasons. "Name?" I showed him the screenshot. "James Hoffman, financial advisor at Meridian Wealth." Eddie typed notes. "What do you need?" "Everything. Daily routine, background, financial situation." I hesitated. "If he's seeing anyone." Eddie's eyes met mine for a brief moment. No judgment, just understanding. "Give me 2 days." Meanwhile, I started documenting everything. Times Lisa left home, discrepancies in her stories, receipts and credit card charges that didn't match her supposed whereabouts. I created a timeline, cold and factual, like preparing evidence for court. On Thursday, Eddie called. "Got that info, not over the phone." We met at a diner far from our usual haunts. Eddie slid a folder across the table. "James Hoffman, 42, divorced 3 years ago, no kids, makes good money but spends most of it. High-end apartment, luxury car, expensive hobbies, mountain climbing, vintage wines." Eddie sipped his coffee. "Bit of a financial mess after his divorce. His ex took him for half. He's been rebuilding." I flipped through the report. Employment history, credit score, address, social media accounts. "The interesting part," Eddie continued, "is his client list. Guess who started investing with him 4 months ago?" The page blurred before my eyes. Lisa's name jumped out, alongside an account I knew nothing about. She opened an investment account with him, transferred $42,000 from your joint savings according to the paperwork. The money we'd been setting aside for our Alaska cruise, our retirement dream. My hand shook. "There's more," Eddie said quietly. "They've been seen together outside of business meetings, restaurants, his apartment building. The paper trail suggests it started professionally, then evolved." I closed the folder. "Thanks." "Frank," Eddie's voice was careful, "what are you planning to do?" I left cash on the table for his services. Nothing stupid, just getting my facts straight before making my next move. But even as I said it, ideas were forming. Cold, calculating ideas that would make things right. After dinner that night, while Lisa watched her shows, I started planning. not in anger, with precision. Mechanics understand that systems require preparation, timing, and the right tools for repair, or dismantling. First, I consulted our family lawyer under the pretense of updating our will. What I really needed was information about our financial exposure and legal options. I learned enough to protect myself. Next, I secured what was mine. I moved my personal items from the garage to a storage unit, tools passed down from my father, irreplaceable photographs. My vintage car would require proper transport, but I made arrangements. My retirement accounts were already separate, thankfully. I transferred my portion of our joint savings, what remained after Lisa's withdrawal, to a new personal account at a different bank. Not hiding assets, just securing them. I changed all my passwords. Email, social media, banking, even our Netflix account. Small actions that helped me feel in control again. The most difficult part was maintaining normalcy at home, acting as if nothing had changed while everything had. I still kissed Lisa goodbye in the mornings, still asked about her day, still brought her tea while she read before bed. She noticed something was different, though. How could she not? "You're quiet lately," she said one evening. "Is everything okay?" "Just thinking about retirement," I replied. Not a lie. "Anything specific bothering you?" I looked at her, this woman I'd built a life with, who now felt like a stranger, and almost broke. Almost asked her why. Almost begged her to explain how she could discard decades together for someone who climbed rocks and drank expensive wine. Instead, I smiled, nothing important. By the following Wednesday, my preparations were complete. I'd documented the affair, secured my assets, and laid the groundwork for what came next. The only thing remaining was to time my move perfectly. On Thursday, I checked our phone records again. Lisa had called James that morning, talking for 12 minutes. I knew from the trail cam footage they hadn't met in 2 days. They were due for a rendezvous. Tomorrow, Friday, my regular fishing day, the day they would typically meet in my garage while I was supposedly by the lake with my buddies. This time, I'd be waiting for them. Friday morning dawned clear and bright. Perfect fishing weather. I went through my usual routine, packed my tackle box, loaded it in the truck, kissed Lisa goodbye. "Catch something good," she said, smiling. "Oh, I intend to," I replied. I drove away, circled the block, and parked behind the Thompson house 3 doors down. They were in Florida for the winter. From there, I had a clear view of our driveway. At 10:17, Lisa's car backed out. I ducked down until she passed. She'd be running errands, creating her alibi. Meanwhile, I entered our house through the back door and went straight to my garage. I settled into the old leather chair in the corner, the one that had been my father's. From here, I could see the entire space. I placed my evidence folder on my lap, phone in my pocket. Then I waited. An hour crawled by. I used the time to rehearse what I'd say, how I'd remain calm, how I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. At 11:43 I heard it, the soft beep of the keypad. The side door opened. James entered first, carrying a bag from that artisan sandwich place Lisa loved. He stepped inside confidently, set the bag on my workbench, then turned to hold the door. Lisa followed, wearing a blue dress I'd never seen, and more makeup than she typically used for errands. She was smiling. That special smile I once thought was just for me. They didn't notice me in the shadowed corner. James pulled her close, kissed her deeply. She responded eagerly, hands in his hair. When they separated, he said something that made her laugh. "Let me get the glasses," she said, turning toward the small refrigerator I kept stocked with water and soda. "Actually," I said, "I'd appreciate if you didn't touch my things." They froze. Lisa went white, hand clutching her chest. James stepped back, eyes darting between Lisa and me, fight or flight visibly calculating behind his eyes. "Frank," Lisa whispered, "you're supposed to be fishing." I smiled thinly, clearly not the only one with alternative plans today. "I can explain," she started, but her voice faltered. "I'm sure you can," I replied. "You've been explaining your whereabouts quite creatively for months now." I turned to James. "Though I don't believe we've been formally introduced. James Hoffman, financial advisor extraordinaire, and apparently garage enthusiast." His eyes widened slightly at my knowledge of his name. Good. I wanted them off balance. "Mr. Taylor," he began, voice steady despite his obvious discomfort, "this isn't—" "What it looks like," I finished for him. "Please, spare me that particular cliché." I stood, folder in hand. "Please sit down, both of you." Lisa hesitated, then took one of the folding chairs. James remained standing. "I'd prefer to—" "Sit down." My voice left no room for debate. He sat. "Frank, please," Lisa began, eyes already welling with tears. "We can talk about this." "Oh, we're well past talking, Lisa." I opened the folder. "Let's review the facts, shall we? You've been meeting this man regularly for at least 3 months. You changed the garage code to give him access to my personal space. You've been lying about volunteering, about visiting your sister, about book club meetings." Her face crumpled with each accusation. I pushed forward. "You've withdrawn $42,000 from our joint savings, money for our retirement, for the Alaska trip we've planned for 10 years, and invested it with your financial advisor here." I gestured at James, a man 15 years younger than me, who apparently gives excellent financial advice while sitting in my chairs and drinking from my mugs. James cleared his throat. "The investment was entirely legitimate. I can show you the—" "I've seen the paperwork," I interrupted, sliding copies from Eddie's report onto my workbench, along with your client list. "Interesting how my wife became your highest priority client. The dinners at Milano's, the theater tickets, the weekend in Chicago last month. Was that all legitimate financial advising too?" Lisa gasped. "How did you—" "Credit card statements, hotel receipts, the earrings in your jewelry box that I never gave you." I laid out each piece of evidence methodically. A man spends 40 years fixing machines. He learns to be thorough. James leaned forward, hands clasped. "Mr. Taylor, I understand you're upset." "Upset?" The word hung in the air. "No, James. Upset is what happens when someone scratches your car or forgets your birthday. What I am is something entirely different." I turned to Lisa. 37 years. We built a life together. I worked 60-hour weeks for decades so we could have financial security. I supported every community project, every family crisis. I may not be exciting, Lisa, but I have been faithful, reliable, and honest, which is more than I can say for you. Her tears flowed freely now. I didn't mean to hurt you. And yet you made hundreds of deliberate choices to do exactly that. Every lie, every meeting, every stolen moment in my garage while I was out there trusting you. I closed the folder. "So no, you don't get to cry now and say you didn't mean it." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and played the trail cam footage of them together on my workbench. Lisa covered her mouth in horror. "Always document the damage," I said quietly. "First rule of insurance claims." James stood suddenly. "This isn't productive. Lisa, I think we should go." "She's not going anywhere with you," I said evenly, "and neither is my money." "That's not your decision to make," he retorted, finding his courage. "Lisa is an independent woman who withdrew money under false pretenses," I finished. "I've already spoken with our bank and our lawyer. The transfer has been flagged as potentially fraudulent given the personal connection between financial advisor and client." I smiled thinly. "Meridian Wealth has strict policies about such relationships, as does the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority." The color drained from his face. "You contacted my firm?" "Not yet. That depends on what happens in the next 5 minutes." I turned to Lisa. "I want the money back, all of it, today." She nodded quickly, her jewelry jangling. "Of course, I'll transfer it back immediately." "And you," I addressed James, will provide written confirmation that you've closed her account, refunded all fees, and will have no further professional or personal contact with my wife." He bristled. "You can't dictate." "I can, and I am. Either comply or by Monday morning, your firm will receive a detailed ethics complaint with evidence, your licensing board will get copies of everything in this folder, and your ex-wife's lawyer will receive information about income you've apparently been concealing during support calculations." His jaw clenched. "That's blackmail." "No, that's consequences." I placed my evidence back in the folder. "You entered my home, took what was mine, and thought there wouldn't be a reckoning." Lisa stood shakily. "Frank, please, can we talk privately?" "Without dash." "Without your boyfriend?" "No." I checked my watch. "James has 5 minutes to agree to my terms before I make the first call." The garage fell silent as James calculated his options. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "Fine. I'll close the account and return the money." "And the no-contact agreement?" His eyes darted to Lisa, who was staring at the floor. "Fine." "Good." I took a form from my folder. "Sign here." He scanned the pre-prepared document, jaw tight. "You planned this whole thing." "While you were planning to spend my retirement funds," I agreed, offering a pen. After he signed, I turned to Lisa. "As for us, there's nothing left to discuss. I've rented an apartment. I'll be moving out tonight." "You're leaving me?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. "You left me months ago, Lisa. You just kept using my house." I folded the signed paper. "I suggest you use this time to think about what you really want, because it clearly wasn't the life we built together." I walked to the garage keypad and entered a new code, one neither of them knew. The final beep echoed with finality. "Don't forget your sandwiches on your way out," I said, and walked through the door into my new life. The first week in my new apartment felt surreal. A one-bedroom on the east side of town, clean, plain, half-furnished. Nothing like the home I'd shared with Lisa for decades. No photos on the walls. No familiar creaks in the floorboards. Just me and the essentials I'd packed in 2 suitcases. Lisa called constantly at first. I let it go to voicemail. She left tearful messages begging me to come home, to talk, to understand. What was there to understand? The evidence was clear. The betrayal undeniable. The money returned to our joint account 3 days after the confrontation. I transferred my half to my new personal account and left hers untouched. Our finances, like our lives, were now separated. My son Michael called from Seattle after Lisa reached out to him. "Dad, what's going on? Mom's hysterical. Says you left without explanation." I laughed humorlessly. That's her version. "So what's yours?" His voice carried the directness he'd inherited from me. I told him everything: the garage code, the trail cam, the financial advisor, the evidence folder. When I finished, silence hung on the line. "Jesus, Dad," he exhaled slowly. "I don't know what to say." "Nothing to say. It is what it is." "Are you okay, though?" "Really?" Was I? The numbness had worn off, leaving something raw underneath. "I'm getting by." "You want me to fly home? Help you sort things out?" I appreciated the offer, but didn't want to disrupt his life. "No need. Just needed you to know the truth." After we hung up, I sat in my sparse new living room, feeling oddly liberated. For the first time in months, there were no lies to detect, no movements to track, no evidence to catalog. The clarity was painful, but clean, like disinfecting a wound. On day 10, Eddie stopped by with a 6-pack and takeout. "Place needs a TV," he commented, looking around. "Haven't gotten around to it." "And some furniture, and maybe a plant." I shrugged. "What for?" "I'm hardly here except to sleep." It was true. I'd thrown myself into activity, volunteering at the Veterans Center, helping friends with car repairs, fishing more than I had in years. Anything to keep moving forward instead of looking back. 2 weeks after the confrontation, our family lawyer called. Lisa's willing to make this easy, Frank. No contest divorce, equal division of assets. She's not asking for alimony. A small mercy. I agreed to the terms. The paperwork would be ready in days. That weekend, I retrieved my classic car. I'd arranged for a flatbed to transport it to a buddy's garage until I found a proper place. Seeing it again, that 1967 Chevelle, I'd restored bolt by bolt. Something cracked inside me. This machine represented years of patience, dedication, craftsmanship, all the virtues I'd brought to my marriage. I ran my hand along its polished hood, remembering how James had touched it with such casual entitlement. I drove to Lake Charlevoix, our old weekend getaway spot. The cabin we'd once rented had been replaced by a modern vacation home, but the shoreline remained unchanged. I sat on a bench overlooking the water, watching families enjoy the late summer day. My phone buzzed. Lisa! Again! This time I answered. Frank. Her voice sounded small. Thank you for picking up. What do you need, Lisa? She hesitated. I need to understand why you won't even try to work through this. Couples recover from affairs. They go to counseling. This wasn't just an affair, I interrupted. This was a systematic campaign of deception. You brought him into my space. You took our retirement money. You lied for months, looked me in the eye every day while betraying everything we built. I made a terrible mistake, she whispered. I got caught up in feeling young again, desired, important. James made me feel... Stop. I couldn't bear hearing how another man made my wife feel. The divorce papers will be ready Tuesday. After hanging up, I realized I'd been gripping the bench so hard my knuckles had gone white. Slowly, I relaxed my fingers, watching color return. The pain would fade too, eventually. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. 1 month after signing the divorce papers, I received a certified letter from Meridian Wealth Management. James Hoffman had been terminated for ethical violations. The firm apologized for any distress caused by his unprofessional relationship with a client and assured me all improper transactions had been flagged for review. I didn't feel the vindication I'd expected, just a hollow satisfaction that consequences had found their mark. By Thanksgiving, my apartment had started feeling like home. I'd added some furniture, hung a few photographs, new ones, taken on weekend trips I'd never had time for before. Michael visited for the holiday. We fried a turkey in my building's courtyard, drank too much bourbon, and talked honestly about everything that had happened. Mom's selling the house, he mentioned, moving to Arizona to be near Aunt Janet. I nodded. The house hadn't felt like mine in a long time anyway. You dating yet? He asked, refilling our glasses. I laughed. Not likely. You should, eventually. He swirled his bourbon. Don't let what she did steal your future. Wise words from a son who'd somehow grown up when I wasn't looking. In December, I bought a small workshop space downtown, enough room for my tools and my Chevelle. A place entirely mine, with no painful memories or betrayals lurking in the corners. I installed a new keypad lock, programmed with a code only I knew. The first project in my new space was a custom fishing rod rack for Eddie, a thank you for his help during the darkest days. Working with my hands again, measuring, cutting, sanding, brought a peace I hadn't felt in months. On New Year's Eve, I declined party invitations and spent the evening in my workshop tinkering with the Chevelle's carburetor. As midnight approached, I poured myself a whiskey and raised a toast to the empty room. To starting over, I said aloud. The garage, my garage, hummed with potential, a space for rebuilding, for moving forward, for remembering who I was before and discovering who I might become after. The betrayal had wounded me deeply, but as midnight struck and the new year began, I realized something important. She had taken my trust, my retirement plans, and nearly 4 decades of marriage, but she hadn't taken my future. That remained firmly in my hands like a well-worn wrench, familiar, useful, reliable, ready to build something new.